We all want to stay informed, but keeping up with everything can feel like a full-time job.
Oh, absolutely.
So, we're trying to break things down for you today. We're taking a look at this report in the Financial Times that seems to suggest there might be some pretty big shifts coming in how Europe thinks about its security.
Yeah, and what jumps out right away is this proposed strategy. A bunch of major European powers, think UK, France, Germany, Nordic countries, they're apparently looking to recalibrate how the US is involved in NATO.
We calibrate. Okay.
Yeah, kind of like over the next 5 to 10 years, maybe, and they might try to make some moves at the NATO summit in June.
Hmm. Interesting. But is this actually everyone in NATO, though? I mean, is
The
everyone on board with maybe dialing back the U.S. role a bit?
Well, that's where it gets interesting. The report makes it seem like it's like causing a bit of a split. You've got countries on NATO's eastern side, places like Poland, the Baltic states, and Romania, and they're not really part of this initiative.
Okay, so what's holding them back? What's their thinking on this whole thing?
Seems like, especially for the Baltics and Romania, they're pretty convinced that the U.S. is still crucial for their security. They really depend on those guarantees from the U.S., and they might not want to say anything that could make the U.S. think about actually pulling back.
Right, so like they don't want to give the U.S. any ideas.
Exactly.
Now, Poland's situation, that sounds a little more complicated, especially with their election coming up in May and all this talk about them getting closer to France. The report uses the term tactical hedge. What does that even mean, like practically speaking?
So imagine Poland kind of hedging its bets. They're exploring maybe getting closer to France, like a backup plan, but they're still really hoping the U.S. stays strong and involved. We'll probably get a better idea of where they're headed after that election.
Right, makes sense. And the Baltic states, they seem pretty set on sticking with the U.S. Seems like only something huge, like some kind of U.S.-Russia deal that leaves them hanging, would make them seriously consider the EU as their main protector.
Yeah, I mean, geographically, they're in a tough spot. So having actual U.S. troops there is, like, essential for them.
Hmm. It's all about location, location, location.
Basically.
Now, the report also mentioned that Romania turned down a French offer for a nuclear shield. That sounds like a pretty clear vote of confidence in the U.S., especially considering the whole Russia-Moldova situation. What makes them so keen on sticking with the U.S.?
Well, Romania has been through a lot, historically speaking, and where they are on the map right by the Black Sea, with Russia making moves nearby, it just makes sense for them to feel safer under the U.S. umbrella. It's direct, it's powerful, it's the U.S. military.
Right, you can't really get more secure than that.
Exactly.
So with all these Eastern countries firmly in the U.S. camp, and Poland maybe just dipping a toe in the EU pool, are we maybe looking at a real dividing line popping up in NATO, like a strategic East-West split?
It kind of paints that picture, yeah. You could have this Eastern Bloc from Estonia all the way down to Romania, maybe even Bulgaria and Greece too, forming this U.S. influence zone. And that would probably affect how France and Germany see themselves in a post-conflict Europe. They want to be leaders, but a big U.S. presence in the East might make that harder.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? These Central and Eastern European countries, they're worried about the U.S. leaving, but at the same time, a stronger Western Europe is a good backup plan for them, just in case.
Yeah.
I mean, even if Russia's not about to attack NATO or anything.
That's the thing. The U.S. is still their first choice, for sure. But a more capable Western Europe would be like a nice reassurance in case things really change.
And it seems like a lot hinges on Poland. That May election could be a huge turning point, not just for NATO, but for how everyone deals with Russia going forward.
Yeah, the report basically says it comes down to three things. Whether those Eastern countries still see Russia as a big threat, whether they prefer U.S. security over the EU's, and whether the U.S. actually stays in Europe.
So we might not be talking about the end of NATO, but maybe a NATO with two distinct parts. Western Europe doing its thing, and the East aligning more closely with the U.S.
That's the idea. And it really makes you think, what happens to Europe if this split actually happens? Is it good for stability? What about the relationship between the U.S. and Europe? What does that world look like in 5, 10 years?
That is a lot to think about.
It is.